Well, I think that the Antoinette of last year compared to the Antoinette of this year is a lot more understanding. That it is okay for things to go at a slower pace than I would prefer. Understanding where the business was when I first joined was difficult to consume, to understand why we couldn't move faster than we were. But I think just being able to digest that progress can also mean baby steps. It can also mean really slower pace. Sometimes you need to just go slow so that you can go fast. So I think in that regard, a lot more patience and understanding, knowing that we're still moving in the right direction. I think that's what was major for me. So changed me to be a lot more understanding and accepting of slower pace for a business. And now, I think I'm a lot more settled now as a person. I think that I realize that I will pick battles in the work of transformation. It can be extremely frictional. And so I now realize that there are battles that will actually resolve themselves over time. There are certain actions that I've placed more energy into than before to reap the kind of rewards that the business is looking for. And so for me, I guess a little more patient than I was last year. A little more laid back, a little more sharper in my resolve to do things with a lot less friction, I reckon, yeah. Okay, so what does it mean to execute? So the underlying factor in my role is change. And a lot of the time, if you come into a business that has tremendous changes that need to occur, it probably means that a lot of things are happening under the current. With my role, there's a lot that is bubbling underneath. Because I have a sales background, it's all about the outcomes. And so even though there's a lot of underground work going on, execution, I always have said, is a skill, right? It's one thing to put fancy reports together, to have fancy big emails and presentations. At the end of the day, we are looking to ensure that there are actually measurable outcomes, tangible outcomes, and it's not always easy to see that in the short term. So what you can do is probably break down your very large goals into very short-term achievable milestones, and then ensure that the business can agree with you on those smaller milestones as you step into the bigger milestones. So execution, still a skill. It requires a lot of collaboration from people, great communication skills as well, in order to influence people to want what you want as well. In that regard, yes. And then in the way it has changed in the organization, I think there's been a lot of growth, primarily from Q1 up until this point. Introducing the OKRs into the organizational structure has really helped to align strategic goals, making sure that we're actually measuring the right things, which boils down to behaviors as well. People will concentrate on what they think they will be rewarded on, and making sure that we concentrate on the right measurements helps them to fine-tune what they actually work on at the end of the day. I love that question. So it's always a battle, and I don't want to belittle operational things, in this regard. I believe that there can be strategic operational things as well. So let's just clarify that first of all. This is not a battle between being operational and being strategic. There are still very strategic operations of a business, and so I'd like to just base it on that. And so in my unit particularly, we sought out to ensure that we could allow, first of all, the leadership think differently about its business. And the first port of call was to ensure that the vision that the leadership was trying to communicate was actually clear to the rest of the organization. I think that was where we started from, and I think we gained a lot of progress in making sure that the vision became clearer. Maybe we're not there yet, but I think it's a lot clearer now what the vision of the organization is. And then the next thing was to cascade that vision across the organization. And we use the OKR framework to do that. The objectives and key results are a very powerful framework in order to allow business objectives cascade and strategic objectives in that regard cascade across the organization. Ownership is top down and it's bottom up as well. So at some point people meet in the middle and they agree that it makes sense and we will all work on this. I think that's the beauty of the OKR. It's come a long way from Intel, and I think it's been refined over the years by technology businesses as well. It's something that I'm used to and I'm comfortable with. And so after that, we now decided to look at performance measures across the organization. Again, what are people actually focusing their energy on? At the end of the day, everything boils down to activities. Whether you like it or not, it's all about activities. Everything you come to work every day and you're doing is activities. But are they directed to the kind of desired outcomes or the strategic outcomes that we want? We ended up having 4 strategic outcomes as a business. We tailored them to meet the expectations, our expectations, what it was that we're expecting for our business visions and goals. And we rallied the entire organization behind it. First of all, the executive management needed to buy into it. They all helped to craft those 4 objectives as well. So it's not an isolated thing where somebody sits somewhere and then they come up with these objectives and then they dish it out to the rest of the organization. No, we all came together and crafted those strategic objectives. Some of them were operational, some of them were commercial, financial, some of them were people related, and some were customer focused, right? And we looked at it across the things that the business truly needed, and we cascaded that as much as possible. Now, it's not an easy thing to introduce OKRs into any organization. There is a lot of resistance. There's a lot of change that is required. OKRs force you to say yes or no if something was done or not done. It focuses squarely on the outcomes. And so we needed to now rally the KPIs behind the OKRs. And so that meant that we had to somehow match or somehow layer on the way the OKRs worked with what we were desiring from the OKRs. I think that was another strategic alignment that we made. And then after that, we started looking at other pockets around the business. Where are our knowledge assets? How does that help us to make decisions in a more predictable fashion? These are more strategic things that we were doing. Some of them are very operational based, but they're very strategic. Our adoption of tools sounds very operational as well, but it's a very strategic operation. Making sure that our processes were not just pieces of paper or just something a click away that didn't really make sense, that we actually were measuring people on those processes as well. If we say that we're going to take A, B, C, D steps or methodologies, then are we? And if we're not, who's measuring, who's watching, who's counting? We also have to hold ourselves accountable as well, and the ownership that is required. So these different things that we did, institutional memory was a big thing for us. It was a very strategic thing for the organization. People come and go. We're in a employee-dominated market now, and there is a surplus of jobs looking for a deficit in talents. And so what that means is that people are going to have a lot more options in the workforce than they ever had before. They're going to have options where they can work from anywhere that they desire in different kinds of roles if they choose. And so what does that mean for an organization? It means that if we're not flexible enough to take on new ways of measuring performance, then we're going to be stuck in the old ways of doing things. And so we decided that we were going to look at measurement very, very differently. We're going to look at how people actually measure themselves as well, because it's one thing for an organization to say, this is what we expect from you, and then the person to align to that as well. So there's a lot of movement. Institutional memory is one thing where if you up and resign today, am I going to crumble as a business? Am I going to keep looking for you to come back, or am I going to be able to stand on my own and move on and get a new person to I wouldn't say hit the ground running. I don't like that phrase because nobody really hits the ground running. You do need time to acclimatize in any new organization, but at least you won't be lost for very long with our institutional assets in place, because we've been disciplined to put those tools in place and work around our tools. The next person coming into that role won't be lost. They will have something to hold on to. Yes, they might need some hand-holding for a short period of time, and that's okay, but they won't be lost forever. So yeah, those are just some of the strategic stuff that we've done over time in the unit. A lot more. I think what we strive for is predictable outcomes. I really don't like to work blindly all of the time. We can be comfortable with ambiguity, but for only a period of time, even a predictable period of time. But we must try and also have predictable outcomes as well, as much as possible. Having data, not just having a gut feeling and instincts about things. With business, I think you need to have some substantial amount of data to make some informed decisions as well.